preparing to go live on, I think,
Cool.
we are streaming live on YouTube. Woohoo!
Ooh,
Yay! Hello, everybody.
exciting.
Even probably nobody sees this live, and most of you are going to watch this as a replay. But we are live. I am live with Balazs. For anybody who didn't see the training on Thursday, go back and watch the replay because it's definitely something you should watch. Like regardless of where you are in your career and whether you're actually looking at building up, a sourcing team. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Balazs, thank you for joining me. And yeah, maybe because I don't think we went a lot into this. I think you live in a world where most people probably know who you are. I would love to kind of, just for the kind of people, like tell a bit about you and especially some of the teams that you helped build, because I know that's a lot of where your training and your talks are coming from, an actual place of where you tried it, you made all the mistakes yourself, like, the good and the bad and the A/B testing. And I'd love to hear, like, and for people to hear kind of like where some of that came from, like some of the teams you worked with and that you build up.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Mark. I just realized that your lighting is much better. I have this like blue on my face. I look like a dead person.
Daylight lamp.
Exactly. I know. I should do like this. You see, woo, much better. So, yeah. So, so basically, what I would highlight is that I've been fortunate to deal with international and big size recruitment and sourcing projects and teams, and also to build some of it. So I started a long time ago, but what is probably interesting for now is that my first RPO sourcing build, that was back to 2009. So that was like 11 years ago, right? And now you can imagine how old I am. So that was 11 years ago when Kelly OCG wanted to start building their sourcing function. So I was really fortunate to be around that whole story. But that was the beginning. That was helpful to really go through some really critical like aspects. Think about like, for the most critical is the separation between sourcing and recruitment. And that's usually something that companies like tend to overlook, like never really think about that. The moment, like, because the real question is that what is the right way to build like sourcing and expertise? Is to hire a few specialists, or is to hire a shared service? Is to build a shared service? Is to to compose that expertise in a certain like part of your organization, but then you separate from the rest of recruitment. So, or is to find a more fluid way. So after Cali OCG, I was invited to join Randstad SourceRight, and that was like, wow, that was a big story. I was young and super ambitious, and I wanted to do much better than all the competitors. And Randstad was in the position to think big and to think in like in greater volume. And I literally was team number one. So we were renting like a half size, like this room behind me, like a half size meeting room, from Randstad Hungary. We were paying for that room, and we started from scratch, and we started to hire the first person and the second person and so on and so on. And you really had to go through all of those aspects and all of those questions, like what is the right DNA, who can do this job, who will be successful at this job, what is the right way to manage client stakeholder management, whatever, what is the right workload, how do you want to measure your people, how do you want to reward your people, how do you want to retain your people, technology, all of that, right? So I built the center up to the size of 120-ish, and then I got a new job within Randstad. But there was a moment, I feel like a grandpa who's saying like, there was a moment in my life when I had 120 badass great sourcers like working with me. That was like Star Wars. I don't know. That was like, wow. That was the moment of your life. And not only did I have that many people, but I had really, really great people, like really like extremely talented and smart and kind like human beings. And like we were hiring from 18 different countries. So imagine that, we were really like spotting them, like all around Europe, and we were trying to bring them into the country. And we had like 28 languages. So yes, it was partly a shared service, but also I would say it was much more of like a COE, so center of expertise, where you really like, well, yeah, look at that. I'm I'm crying. No, I'm not. But it was that, like time of your life when you were surrounded by like 120 extremely intelligent people, and you knew that you could do whatever you want to do. Like whatever. And that was that. And then after a short break, not that short, but after a break, I was invited by Seattle. And they said, they had a totally different point of view. So they said, you know what, we don't want to have a shared service. No, that's not the way how we want to bring in sourcing. So they were more, remember that was a shared service, right? Separation. And they were more of like this. Can you build and scale the sourcing expertise around the planet into each and every of our recruiters? And there's so many people say, yeah, that's training. Well, it's not just training. It's more of like, it's the passion part. When I joined Cielo, I said, that's 2,000 people. I said, I want to have 2,000 people to fall in love with sourcing. I want to have 2,000 people to rave about sourcing, to love sourcing, to be passionate about sourcing, because that's the only way how you can build such an organization. Otherwise, you hire sourcers. And, and that's the rule of engagement, then you do a lot, and you do, first you establish yourself, and then you establish a smaller team, and then so you constantly like scope out and expand. Then, just a few weeks ago, yeah, so maybe one more thing, and then I stop, promise. But a great pillar in that story still is the hackathon. We call it hackathon. So there's a sourcing games by Jan Tegze. And, as you surely know, but like our audience may not know, is that so Jan Tegze has built the corporate version of sourcing.games, and we are a client.
Sourcing test online, yeah, exactly.
Correct, sourcing test.online, yeah. So, and we were, I think, probably one of his first clients.
One of the first, yeah.
Yeah. And, we went scale like on global basis, and still today we have something like 700-800 users, like players. I mean, imagine that. And so on that platform, we run sourcing games, and, it's like, now it's part of our DNA, which is great. And I can talk a lot about that one if you want to. So, but like a few weeks ago, I wanted to create some easy games, like some games for rather for engagement than for education. And I talked to the CEO of Cielo, like Sue Marks, and I said, hey, I want to build a hackathon about you, Sue. And even she took the time to review my questions, to check some of the answers, and to say, well, okay, fine, it's all fine, you go for it. So it is that part of a 2,000 big company's DNA. Yeah, so I can really, like, I have lived through both, like the enormous growth and, like how to really inspire such a big crowd when you have like leadership, like power or, like assignment. And also I lived through when you need to influence an entire company basically without any power.
You had a nice title though.
You had a nice title, correct. You were an officer, but no power, right? I was not in the position to hire or fire, like nothing, not even budget whatsoever, right? So it's not that type of power. It is really like, we don't like this, I guess, the thought leadership, but it is really like that type of like.
It's an influencer role. You have to influence at all levels.
Yeah, it's just like a celebrity. No.
It's funny, and it's like not a lot of people that I know, you know, some of it. It's like I used to work for Cielo, and so did my wife, so I know the organization very well. I know it from before they got merged, so when it was still Okra House.
Yeah.
That was my first job in the UK.
Wow.
And one of the things I think least people know, one of my best teams that I've worked in was the ThoughtWorks team. And I came in on the back of you working with Natalie, who had the idea of building up a COE of how to structure that. So I came in on the back of talking to Natalie from the talk that you gave in Amsterdam about, you know, what that process was like. So that was your in-between consulting gig. And then worked with Natalie to kind of build it to what it was. And then like also to build, well, to help like the idea and kind of like, how do we get this build in India to where the team is now with Akbar Ali, Anuja, and Anikit, who just went live today on my channel. And they're building, I think they're a team of 10 now. So kind of, you know, taking that, working with Aaron Lintz in the US to kind of, you know, how do they cover the globe? So a lot of the kind of things that I know that you help build the structure of to work with that. So yeah, I kind of seen your work from the inside, and like I know what, we haven't directly worked together, but I've been the beneficiary of a lot of that kind of building the foundation and the idea and the ideation, and then taking that further.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I read a novel, like a Hungarian novel a long time ago, and there was a scene when the guy moved to countryside, you know, to a really old house, and he had to partly rebuild the house, but you know, it was really old. So actually, when he touched the bricks, he was able to touch the palm of the previous, you know, the previous owner, because the previous owner also touched, you know, like it was a little bit like that. Yes. And so like, you know, like you were able to whatever. Yeah. Okay. And the ThoughtWorks, you know why ThoughtWorks was super meaningful for me? Besides the fact that I fell in love with Natalie, and
as we all do. Yeah.
As we all do, right? let's make a like a GIF from this one. Like you need to send it to her. So ThoughtWorks was like, that was super helpful in my thinking to go through like the full liberty of sourcing, like, you know, like to really realize that, you know, we tend to live by traditions and by habits and by whatsoever, and you know, we tend to believe that the sourcer is a post researcher, and then, you know, on this whole model, we said, you know what, like we can really like play with these things, you know, so part of sourcing expertise can be built there, and then, you know, we will have some people here, and then it's really fluid. And that's what I said, you know, last week in the amazing hiring call, that every company has to find their solution, because sourcing is an expertise, but also it can be a person, you know, like it can be a sourcer, and it's a fluid thing, and you know, it's constant, like in a constant evolution. So yeah, that was for me, because that time I was coming from the Randstad environment, and we said, you know, like let's make big, let's have like hundreds, and then it was like a mind shit for me as well.
No, and it was brilliant, and even coming in, so I came in 6 months after, but even there, it was still very much a team that was forming. And it wasn't more rigid than like we could sit down. It's like, is this what we want the team to be? And like we changed the way that we worked, and they're still changing the way they work. Like now with the team in India, you know, they're coming up with their own way of doing things. And I talk to them once in a while, and they're like, yeah, we're still following the basic idea of what you put in place, but we've changed it completely. I'm like, that was exactly what we wanted to do, because if it's the same process you always do, then you're gonna be old, you know, you're gonna be old fashioned all the time. It's like, so like you need to constantly be in motion and to be flexible enough to change with the environment that you're in.
Yep, totally.
And you know, they're now supporting all of ThoughtWorks globally with all the regions. So you still have that thing where it's like there's still a distributed with, every recruiter should source as well. And I think and one of the questions that came up on Thursday was like, how much time does a recruiter spend on sourcing if they're in a distributed model? And I know you gave like, you know, a kind of your answer. But for me and what I saw, and that was specifically both in ThoughtWorks and what I've seen in a lot of other companies I've been in, it's rarely, if it's a 360 recruiter, full stack recruiter, most of the time it's like, if the passion isn't there for sourcing, what it ends up being is like they don't prioritize it. So I had a lot of conversations with recruiters that are like, I need your help, not because I don't know how to do it, but I don't, I have an hour a week to do sourcing. And I'm like, well, the bigger issue is you don't prioritize sourcing and you don't see that. And that's like, you have a lot of incoming, a lot of meetings and things like that. And I'm like, well, fair enough. Like I've had, I started my career in sales and recruitment company. I've done full stack recruiter most of my career. Sourcing is a specialism that I do out of passion, but also that I tend to take roles, even if they're full stack recruiter roles, with heavy sourcing, where it's like nobody knows you in the market. So guess what? You're going to have to, because nobody's going to apply.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the real answer. It's like, it all depends on how much you want to spend on sourcing and how much your current job lets you.
Yeah. So it is I think it is a really core question, like the whole sourcing and passion, and whether people can like sourcing or can fall in love with sourcing. And I'm unsure if I can cite the person with a great sourcing mind who once told me that, hey, Balazs, unfortunately, we have to acknowledge and we have to accept the fact that sourcing is not scalable. And he's the God, I can tell you. I guess you know who he is. And he's one, my God. And I was entirely sad, because I was like, hey, you and I, we've been fighting, we've been on this road, like on this whole journey for a long time. And, we've been fighting to spread the love of sourcing and to train sourcers, to build sourcing functions, to, and now it's like, when.
Are you telling me you can't?
Exactly. Now that young Padawan is talking to the Yoda master, and it's like, man, he's telling me that after all of these 20 years, it's like, it was like a waste of time. And he's like, it's not scalable. And what is really, like, I think like a future question, like it should be answered somewhere in the next 3, 5, 2 years, is that how much sourcing is scalable, and how much sourcing scalability we can really employ with technology.
Mm-hmm.
Because the challenge is that, so the level of sourcing that you run, and hopefully still I run, that part is really difficult to challenge, to scale, to train people in that one.
It's an experience. And it's like, we do it because we're passionate about it. We would spend days researching things that we might never use for anything, but just in case, and we think it's cool.
And also, I think we, probably all of us, we've made a lot of extra miles. I remember when I was younger, and and I was sourcing midnights, and when I discovered first time, but back to 2012, when I discovered the Facebook search part, like that was, you remember, right? It was like a big thing that time. Shit, that was 8 years ago, Mark. And
then they switched it off, and
then they killed it. Yeah, I know.
Well, and it's always like, well, people knew how to do it, but they still don't know how to engage people. So it's like, it doesn't.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So so I think it is a bloody question, like whether sourcing is scalable, and and the reason why many recruiters don't find time for sourcing is because sourcing is still a lot manual. Well, okay, you can get to.
No, it is. I mean, I'm going to talk about automation and things like that, but at the end of the day, it's like, I can tell you things that you can automate.
Yeah.
But I've done this for a lot of years now as well. I don't automate a lot of things. One, because I like the control, and two, because I don't trust the automation. It's just not good enough. And it's like, I want to teach people how to do it manually, so they know what it is they're automating,
right? And
use tools to make it faster rather than to do their job for them.
Right. Like you really like hit a keyword in my current life, is that we don't trust yet automation. So, like even with Phantom Buster, like even when I could run a scraping repeatedly, I still prefer, I don't know why, I still prefer to sit here, like when I'm working, and to push the fucking button. Like,
the same. You're using, a data miner. I don't, a couple of reasons. One, I got locked out very early because I scraped too many pages in a week. So I got lifetime ban on that specific email address. I could have gone back. Two, I don't like their setup. So I found an old GitHub repository of an old version of what is now Data which has not been updated for 10 years. That's what I run. It has no, like, there's no recipes, there's no repositories, there's no nothing.
Wow.
So I had to teach myself to actually write the recipes. But again, I have full control. I take each page at a time. And if I make a mistake, at least I know where it is.
Correct,
and, like,
exactly.
I like that. It's like, okay, I might only get 25 at a time. This is going to take me 4 hours.
And you know what?
But the thing that I get out of just watching that data flow, because I'm seeing it, because I'm copy pasting it. I'm not just seeing a stream of Matrix movie.
Yeah. So what I think a lot nowadays is that when you, for instance, if you automate, let's say a LinkedIn invite, okay, and you want to use, let's say, the first name hashtag, like that tag, and you say, hey, hashtag, hey, first name, good morning, whatever. And especially in Hungary, but also in Eastern Europe, right? Some people are confused what is first name, last name. I mean, especially in Hungary, because we
French-speaking countries.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Eastern
totally.
Europe. The further south you get in Europe.
Okay, but then, and I had there's a HR director in Hungary whose last name means something. It's like an agricultural tool. I cannot even tell you, but it means like when you work on the fields, really. And that's her last name, and her first name is whatever. And she's got it the other way around on LinkedIn. So every time, and I sent her at least 4 emails, like automated. Every time I'm saying like, hey, tool. And it sounds so weird, and I cannot apologize enough. Now, the question is that, okay, hold on, Mark. So I can send out 10, let's say 1,000 great emails, and I will make one mistake. That's the power of automation. Or I want to believe that I personally, because I control it, I will not make any mistakes. I will really make sure whatever, but probably I will not be able to do the same in the same scale. And I think that's the mindset shift that I started to like work on in my brain. When I said, you know what, I may not care.
For some things you just don't care. It's like, for sourcing is, if there's 10,000 people that could do the job, you might get a bit more relaxed on how personalized you do it. If there's 100 and you know that grows with one person a year, you might take a bit longer and just cross your eyes and make sure you do a bit more personalized.
Correct. And also, I was talking to a sourcer, and he said, you know what, if it's 100 people, that will still be low-hanging fruits. There will still be people who will anyway react. And that's also, like a growth mindset. You say like, why would I do my extra work for the low-hanging fruit? And now we may get really bad feedback on this whole story, right? No, I don't mean like, of course you work, but there will be some people who are interested in your job, so you don't have to do all the extra mile, right? So if you can automate that part, if you can automate that early interest people, why not, right? So that's and I am challenging myself because I have the same like control. I mean, hey, I was leading 120 people and I love that, right? I am control freak, and I still train my brain to say, nope, there will be mistakes. Yes, there will be some really shitty mistakes. You won't be so proud of that, but at least you can do that in scale. And the power of running these things in scale, I mean, it's always what's worse or what's better, right? If you do that, if you have to hire 300 nurses in whatever, Scranton, Pennsylvania, you'd rather connect with 5,000 nurses. Maybe some of them will not be nurses anymore because they may have changed. Then,
and you're going to get some angry emails.
Yeah, exactly.
You should have checked it. And
but that's a mindset change, I guess.
Absolutely.
I find it really fascinating. Yeah.
No, and we were talking some about that. And then I'm sure that, look, we can talk tools from now until Kingdom Come. And if you really want, you can go and watch Dean DaCosta. He's going to talk tools for hours and, show you pages and pages. It's like most of it, I have 4 probably that I use on a semi-regular basis. And you'll get that with a lot of people who've done this for a long time. It's like, you get over the whole like, oh, let me search for the new tool. It's like, let me just like, it's a bit like being in agriculture. Like, let me find, that tractor that just works. Yeah, it might be 20 years old, but it works. I'm not going to fix it. And I'm not going to spend $1 million on some new, John Deere with all the latest software. It's like, it works. It works for me. I know how to use it. Like I could automate something. So
that's what I like with training, because I'm, like as you are running training as well. That's what I like, that, you are kept fresh. Like, so for instance, I was like discovering, not a big deal. I think it's just a kind of deal that actually so when you search Instagram, you should rather use emojis than words. And it's not a big deal, Mark, it's just a simple X-ray, a Google X-ray. However, that tick in the mindset when you realize that, oh shit, people may just use their flag and they don't write Danish, right? Because they use the flag, because the flag is less character, and and that's how we try to like save space. And people may use the scientist emoji instead of writing than scientist, and and by the way, because there are like male and female scientists, that's already something, like, so that's just the way how people think.
Yeah.
So is it a search that I would use as step one now? But is it a search that can be helpful time to time, that I'm really all about, to find that Japanese speaking in Hungary? Of course I would try it. I would try those two little flags and let's see what comes up. But I'm totally with you. I don't like to share tools just for the sake of sharing tools, because
I'm a bit like most of us. We're like, I'd rather teach you how to do it, and then teach you, like, show you a tool that can help you do it. And I mean, Amazing Hiring has been really good at doing that from the beginning. Like a lot of the webinars that I've done with them and that like that they do, it's about, this is the process. And it's why we go through all of this training as well. It's like, let's look at Twitter, let's look at Facebook, let's look at LinkedIn. Like, yes, Amazing Hiring has 60 different social networks and they all mapped it. But what we don't do is like, well, it's easy. You just punch in a few things and then Amazing Hiring is going to show you everything. We're like, how do you do this on LinkedIn? How do you do this on Twitter? So that you know the results that you do get, where they come from and why you can use them and what you can use them for. But also, if you have one of those weeks where LinkedIn goes down and like me, you wake up the next day and you're like, I didn't know it happened because people blew up Twitter because LinkedIn was down. You're like, well, because I don't need one network. I'm never just on one network. Like LinkedIn is important, but it's not the most important.
Yeah. Would you replace, and this is not an Amazing Hiring promo whatsoever, right? It's really my question. Would you be bold enough or ready? Would you be ready to replace one of your, if you are about to lead a team, right? Let's say you work for a tech company, you have a team of 6 people. For LinkedIn recruiters, would you replace one of them with Amazing Hiring? Like really, like just like cancel that one?
If I was doing tech sourcing and I knew I wouldn't need anything outside of that, I would replace 5 out of 6. Because it's like I've had LinkedIn Recruiter since it came. What it does, it's brilliant if you're a manager to do lots of statistics of how many emails you send. I pissed off some managers by not showing up in those statistics because for 3 months I wouldn't send an email. But I don't. I can show you all my email statistics, but I haven't sent an email. I'll use it if I have to, and I'll do it as a follow-up thing if I can't find, but I'll rather connect with them on LinkedIn and I'll rather, DM them on Twitter than send them an email, especially if they're technical, because they're not going to see it. So I would definitely use that. Like look, it's a lot of money to pay for LinkedIn Recruiter. A lot of the companies now that have had to let people go, but LinkedIn is not letting them get out of their contracts. So you might have had to fire 10 people in your big team, but you're still stuck with 10 licenses. That's what it is. It is like LinkedIn Recruiter is lovely. You can do projects and things like that, but there is other tools you can do the same thing with. And as a manager, I can get the same statistics somewhere else, but it's easy to get them from LinkedIn. Again, I don't trust LinkedIn's data, so it will be part of that as well. I've just seen too many things that doesn't make sense. Like we look at it in the different versions of LinkedIn, it's like we don't get the same numbers.
Correct.
How is
exactly.
that, you know?
Oh yeah. And also that, the undocumented changes in in all of these things, right? So, like I recently discovered that when you put, let's say, Java developer in quotation marks to any country, you will get a ridiculously small number of people. Not only because you are using quotation marks and that searching for the exact phrase, but also because LinkedIn starts to think on your behalf, and they say, no, I think I'm getting that. Let me show you the right people. And they show you, like, in Hungary, I recall if you search like Java developer or Java engineer in quotation marks, you get something like 30 people. And you'd be like, really? Okay. Wow, that's a talent shortage.
I've probably hired more Hungarian Java developers than that.
Correct. Exactly. So, yeah. Okay.
No, I definitely, like I had, and I've advocated for that before. It's like, look, if you don't force me, I don't need it. I've been, like, the last contract I worked in, they asked as well, like, oh, do you need access to LinkedIn Recruiter?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't need it. Like my wife, who I work with, who's a sourcer as well, like we didn't need it.
Yep.
Because it's like, well, I don't need to look at your recruiters project, what you've already done.
Right.
I don't need the emails. It limits me to 150 emails in the first place as anyway per month. It's like, with the kind of volume that you're looking at, I don't know what I was like, what would I going to do with 150?
Right.
And then I have to wait. There's no visibility of whether people clicked on that, opened it, if they clicked on any of my links in it, or which I get with email. I can track that.
Correct. Exactly.
Whether people like that or not. I can track if they open it. I know if they click my, I'd use a lot of videos. I know if they watched my video. I know how much they watched. I know if they click on my call to action and set up a call with me with my calendar link. So I like control. LinkedIn doesn't give it to me. LinkedIn is lovely if you're doing a generalist role, or like one day you're doing an accountant, the next way you're doing a Java developer. It's like, okay, you can faff around. Or if you're in a big teams where you don't know if somebody already reached out to your candidate because you don't have a CRM. That's another kind of thing. Do you have a good CRM?
I never understood that one, and that runs me crazy, I can tell you. I mean, really, why would you? Okay, well, many companies still don't have an ATS, right?
So that's another, It's like, no, but that's what we got Google for now, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, companies still, like big companies, great companies, still question the value of a CRM, and they still. I just talked to a resourcer in a few hours, and we were laughing because many companies don't. I mean, many companies still work like recruit like just in time right now, and that's all, right?
Yeah.
And
how many candidates do you have for me now for this role that I just invented?
Exactly. And they never think about that. Okay, well, if we were able to use or reuse the candidates from yesterday or the previous months or last year, I mean, if I had anyway.
No.
Yeah, it's
one of the questions you had that I actually liked as well was, is it a good idea to work in a couple, like recruiter and sourcer?
Mm-hmm.
And I know you answered that yes. You work with models like that as well. Yeah.
Enjoy. Yes, definitely. So better, right? Again, I think the sourcer recruiter buddy or tandem or couple, I guess but it's a huge issue, like a potential like pitfall is the lack of collaboration and lack of trust. And it's this is not any recruitment specific, right? So like now we have a setup, you are asking questions and I have to answer. If I wouldn't trust you, if I was thinking you would ask really weird questions, I would be super scared, right? So again, it wouldn't work. And that's all the things. So the moment when you separate these things, like in a manufacturing line, if technicians wouldn't trust each other, then they would lose their arms and legs and whatsoever, right? And that's the same with recruitment. And unfortunately, that's what we are seeing a lot. So recruiters tend to not trust the sourcer because the sourcer is not accountable for the hire, and that can totally like
I mean, it all kind of depends where the quote unquote handover is as well. Like I've worked in roles like this. Like I've been brought in as a specialist sourcer where, the recruiter was a good recruiter, but had, half the experience that I did. And my handover was after qualifying them. And then the recruiter was like, I'm supposed to interview them, but I don't know what I'm supposed to ask them that you didn't ask them. You have those. I've had other roles where it's like, the recruiter has had a lot of control, like wanted to control everything. And it's like, my candidates were not his candidates. So there was it was like, I'll look at them whenever, they got into the pile of all the other applications. And when I talk to candidates, like there's a sense of urgency because it's generally people who were not thinking of moving, but we've put something in their head about like, oh, maybe I'm not, maybe there is a better thing out there. I don't have 3 weeks to wait for recruiter to get around to maybe looking at their details and then maybe seeing if so that's why I like being in roles where it's more of a 360 role but a heavy emphasis on sourcing, where if I promise a candidate that they're going to speak to a hiring manager next week, they are going to speak to a hiring manager next week because I'm going to set it up.
Yeah. So what I would also add is that, so if we want the sourcer to really deal with passive candidates only, so only that market, then we have to acknowledge and also accept that we've already limited the chances to make a hire. And I think that's the first idea. If I'm a recruiter and I'm running my processes and I need help, I need additional candidates, and I reach out my sourcer buddy and I'm getting some candidates, and regardless I make or I do not make a hire, I need to appreciate those efforts. So that's like one, like number one pitfall. Number two pitfall is that, or solution can be that, not a pitfall. Solution can be to say, you know what? If I work on this rack, you as a sourcer, you will be responsible for every candidate, whatever, right? Like it can be internalized, referrals, applicants, passive, active, whatever. And that's another way, how to succeed together. Because in that case, I'm telling you that, whatever you do your magic.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had Tiffany Balway from Microsoft on the show a couple of weeks ago. And she said, well, she's a manager of a sourcing team, but her sourcing team is responsible for the people all until they get an offer. And I was like, how is that sourcing? And so she said, well, because they do like hiring days where they bring big groups of people in, they interview, and then they basically hand them over when they're ready to, to get an offer. And exactly that. She's like, well, I have people on my team that did nothing else than look at old applications. Who did we miss? Because this is a big company. There's always going to be somebody that got missed. And it's like, and she's in a location that isn't traditionally a Microsoft location, but she's like looking back at old candidates and she's like, did we miss something? Did some of the other recruiters miss somebody that we can use for what we're doing? And it's like, I love that because it's like, sourcing isn't just about getting that passive candidates. It's like my client that I worked with up until like some months ago, I was also like, give me the candidates, like people who applied 2 years ago that you still have on file, because I know that their interest in you. There's been a lot of change, she said, like change of management, change of interview process and things like that. Look at them and reach back out to them and say, look, we're still here and we would like to talk to you again. Where are they now kind of thing. So
like, we had in Seattle, we had a big client. They still have that client. It's a giant client, a giant. And their HQ is in the middle of nowhere, like really like
most giant clients.
Exactly. As most giant companies, they settle down somewhere really far from real life. And they still have to hire people in that HQ, right? But how can you find, let's say, a financial analyst? You have to look, there is no one out there, right? Whoever was living there, that's already working for that giant company. So and then you do what? You face the American market, you have like 300 million people, say a number, 100,000 are financial analysts. What is your process? Do you start in an alphabetical order and you say,
do you look at other companies with headquarters in the middle of nowhere just because they're used to it?
Like, exactly, those people may enjoy these setups. You're right, or what? You can you can crawl through the like surrounding states or counties, but really what they do. And what we did, we told the sourcer that, so the sourcer was running a search on LinkedIn, putting the easy keywords, financial, whatsoever, and just selected first level connection. And then we set the URL of that LinkedIn search to the hiring managers and said, hey, John, hey, Patrick, hey, Mark, hey, Balazs, can you just like check your first level connections? Do you see anyone, who might be a great candidate for us? And you know what? We made 5 hires within a few weeks.
Because it's, we have that, I have that with a couple of people now as well. It's like, look through, you might not have a huge LinkedIn network because you don't use it professionally like we do, but just look through them. Those people you went to high school with, guess what? Is now a managing director. She has her own company. She's actually hiring. It's like a lot of people now, like, I got fired, I got furloughed, I don't know what to do. It's like, look through your own LinkedIn network. It's like the people you haven't been in touch with since you connected on LinkedIn 5 years ago, they're on the different places. Some of them,
but run a search. So set up some filters, set up, like have those keywords, because also managers are not professional sources.
No.
Right? But if you make it like work for them, if they just need to review like a handful of people, like that's just another way. And that's
if you want to do a lot of more work, I normally do that as well. First thing I do when I start with a new client is I connect with everybody in that company. It's like set up one of the automation tools. I'm going to talk about one of them, but, might be a robot. Set that up. It's like, okay, I'm going to run a search for everybody who works in that company.
Right.
Send them pretty much in, because they can they can see on my LinkedIn profile, I'm now also in that company. So I will get a high and level of connection. And then all of a sudden you can start actually just searching in their network. So next time you walk into a strategy meeting with a hiring manager, you're like, look, I looked through your connections. Like, these are the people I think, like, thumbs up or thumbs down. Or your engineering team is like, yeah, you don't have a lot of connections, but these 3 people that you're connected with, you used to work with, what do you think? Are they any good?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I love these.
Cool.
What else do we have on the list? How much time do we have?
We have another kind of 5-10 minutes. We have one which I really like because it comes back in one of the articles I think you wrote last year. How do you measure market intel? And for people who haven't read that article, Bala was talking about like setting up a sourcing team. What we forget a lot of the time when we're trying to sell that to senior management or to our company of what sourcing is. And what we get a lot of the times is like, how many hires are you going to get out of it? Which is always a difficult, discussion. But what we forget to say is like all of the intel that we actually get. If you're like me and you do the screening calls, you get a lot of salary details from competing companies. And what we do, just in terms of what we actually do as a job, we do a lot of talent mapping, a lot of competitor mapping, a lot of market intel that sales team could use, the marketing team could use, like senior management. Like I know some of the people in our industry have worked a lot on like, we could have put another office in another country. You use sourcing team for that, finding out where are there, where the kind of hotspots of the people we would normally search for that won't relocate to where we are. But if we put an office in there, where would it make most sense? So yeah, tell me a bit about like, how do you measure the kind of market intel piece of it? Right.
So it is really interesting because I think the recruiter brain is constantly looking for saving. We are like wired to look for saving, and as you were talking, I was like, yes, saving. Yes, you can save cost, you can save time, you can save, but you know what? We can make extra revenue, right? So I remember I was joining that was from Microsoft, God knows when, 2000, I don't know, what time. And that was in Singapore, and that was the Asian Microsoft market intel strategy. There was a public presentation. That's why I'm citing Microsoft. And actually, Microsoft was able to map not only the talent segment, but also, for instance, the product segment and all of the like new product, so the MPIs, right? And I'm not saying now, that they were able to see everything, but they were, as they talked to the people, right? They got some insights, and these things can be extremely helpful for sales, for product development, for R&D, for whatsoever, right? So yes, it's easy. I think it's easy to prove saving. When you let's have an example. When you pay salary benchmark companies a little bit of a fortune, right? You pay Mercer or whatever else, and usually companies pay a lot, like a lot, instead of running some market intel or even just like scraping Glassdoor data or whatever, right? Job board data, or even just like having a look within your ATS and then build an MI report from that one. That's already a lot of saving. But also, certainly it can be, time saving. You can shorten the process whatsoever. So another point, and that's not saving, but again, that's growth, is when I was talking to a company who said, you know what, it was again back to 2013, I guess. And it was a giant tech company, and they said, you know what, I current like axis or angle is is sort of like like London, Berlin, whatever, Paris, Rome, so that one. However, over the next 5-10 years, we want to move it to Helsinki, St. Petersburg, and Tel Aviv. So can we do that? And and the request was like, will we be able to hire the right talent? Are they there? Are they waiting for us? What do we need to do to attract them? Can we be successful if we really move the whole focus of our company? So what is the value in that case of market intel? Like, it's a lot of cost saving, it's a lot of time saving, it's a lot of growth, it's probably new products, So I think what is difficult with MI is that it's difficult to structure that data. So what I'm seeing is and that's why usually companies don't deal with it, because it's really ad hoc. So what I saw, like some case studies when Market Intel was winning, was when you decide like a few standard products. You say, you know what, for every hard to fill rack, we will run a little bit of a market mapping. You don't have to do two big things, but at least check LinkedIn, check this, that, like come up with some numbers, check job boards, check supply, demand, whatever, build one slide and just show it. Or you say like, you can even like the market mapping on the competitor side, whatever, right? Or you want to do, let's say, like a university, like a fresh graduate scan every year. So like to have some standard market intel products in place that you can constantly replicate, that you can maintain, that you can constantly use. And then, from that moment, you can embed basically the whole market intel thinking, to use it. I think that's the first step, because otherwise, yes, because otherwise it's difficult. Otherwise, it will be really ad hoc, and whatever is ad hoc, that's not. I mean, that's measurable for that moment, but not sustainable for a longer time. That's why I think the standard market intel things are just better.
No, and I like your kind of thinking of like, what would it cost to actually, what we get for sales or what we get for marketing, like what would it cost us to, because it's what in-house teams generally look at, like how much are we saving compared to if we went to an agency? How much are we, like a lot of our POs have kind of like, we're insourcing it now. How much are we saving from paying an RPO? And an RPO business model, a lot of the times it's like, what's your savings from if you had to pay agencies or your own people for this? So no, I like that. Look, we've been speaking for almost an hour, and I do love talking to you, but
and we could go on, right? That's what I was asking.
Balázs, if people want to continue following you and see what you're working on, how can they best do that?
Well, they can go to my really humble website, which is thebalazs.com.
So not to be confused with the other Balázs, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because there are too many. No, okay, I tell you this. So it wasn't me, Mark. It wasn't my ego that time. No, it was not. Nope.
What? Somebody had balash.com and you couldn't buy it?
No. So actually it was Twitter. That time it was like back to whatever, I don't know, 12 years ago, when I was signing up to Twitter, because my name is like Parócai Balázs, and I respected people being not able to memorize my name. People cannot even like spell my first name, not even my last name. And I wanted to find a Twitter account name that people may somehow remember. And the way how Twitter search works is that the moment when you start typing in the name, the Bala, it will like come up with suggestions. And that's the only reason why I picked the Balázs. I can tell you, I personally do not like it because it sounds so shameful, but at least people can memorize it. So, so yes, that's the best way where people can connect with me. There is a connect form. They can also find me everywhere, literally everywhere. So yeah, but I guess the website is the best. I try to put everything now to that one website.
Excellent. Look, thank you very much. And yeah, thanks for your training on Thursday.
Well,
and,
thank you so much.
See you soon again when we get out of this lockdown.
Yeah.
Thanks.